Good morning, WTOB listeners. I'm Dylan Greenwood here with Harold Eustache on For the Record with Greenwood Law. Today we got a very special guest with us here on For the Record with Greenwood Law, and that is Jim O'Neill of the District Attorney's Office here in Forsyth County. He is our local elected DA, and we really appreciate you coming on the show with us today, Jim.
Well, I certainly appreciate you all having me.
It is quite an honor to have you here. We've had a long-running guest list on the show, and I mean, you keep adding to that, so we really appreciate you coming. And we wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the ways in which your office does community outreach. And a show that we did a couple of weeks back was about the issues facing our schools here locally in Forsyth County. Mm-hmm. There's been a number of things in the news. Weapons on educational property, obviously the stuff that happened at Mount Tabor. And, you know, I know Harold and I have talked about how impressed we were with your office's response, with local law enforcement's response in the wake of what happened at Mount Tabor. And I was just impressed with your words that day about, you know, your community outreach, how serious you take these cases. Mm-hmm. And we know that personally from having litigated against some of your assistant district attorneys in your office. You know, we see that day in and day out, but we just wanted to hear your words on that.
So again, thank you first of all for having me. I'm glad to be here with you all and to the listeners out there. When you look at the shooting that occurred at Mount Tabor, I think one of the things that has resonated with me, and I think it's important for folks to know, and I've said this over and over again, is that this was an ongoing beef between two individuals, and it was not, you know, when we think of like a shooting that occurred down in Parkland, Florida, mm-hmm. It wasn't a random person coming in and just shooting at students. So, you know, I think the Forsyth County school system does a wonderful job here. We believe in the public school system, as you both know. My kids, I drop them off at public school every single day, and we do believe that they provide a safe environment for our kids. But I also think that it's worth mentioning that there are individuals that attend the schools that are a distraction to the students that are there, that are trying to work and learn. And if they're committing acts of violence at any of our schools in Forsyth County, it's my job to be sure that we hold the line, mm-hmm. and that we take these cases very seriously so that parents will know that there'll be repercussions and real punishments for individuals that make the school system unsafe for our kids. It's when we send them off to school every single day, we want to know that people are going to keep our kids safe. The teachers at Mount Tabor did an outstanding job. The administration did an outstanding job. And of course, I thought our law enforcement did an outstanding job that day as well. I can't comment on the facts of the case, obviously, but I can tell you outside of what occurred there, our law enforcement are heroes when they rush into a scene not knowing what to expect or what they're going to find, but they're there to keep us safe and protect us and look after our most precious commodity, our children.
Right, and our kids are in the same class actually in school. I know one of the things you and I have talked about before is how sometimes you have to be up late at night to take calls about stuff that happens around the city, mm-hmm. And of course, I think even recently with Mount Tabor and other things that have happened, I think folks are looking very closely at gun violence in Winston-Salem. So can you tell us about, you know, if you receive a call late at night, something happens in the city, kind of what process do you go through?
So before I became the district attorney, I was handling a lot of the violent crimes and murder cases. And when I transitioned and became the district attorney in 2009, I wanted to be sure that I continued to stay involved, especially in the most serious cases, the murder cases. And so essentially I'm on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as most people can guess, the majority of our crime does not happen during banking hours between 9 and 5.
Right.
It happens during the course of the night. And so I sleep with the phone next to my bed, and often get up, especially on the weekends, to try and assist law enforcement with being sure that they've collected the evidence that we need, or if they want to bounce some ideas off me. So the weekends are generally the time that I'm getting the least amount of sleep, and try to catch up on that as the week progresses. But they're serious cases. They're the most serious cases we have next to child sex offense cases. And I believe that having done this for 25 years now, that my experience can really help local law enforcement put together the best possible cases that we can for prosecution, so that the victims' families are going to get the attention and the justice ultimately that they deserve.
If you're just joining us on For the Record with Greenwood Law, I'm Harold Eustache along with Dylan Greenwood. We have District Attorney Jim O'Neill of Forsyth County here with us. And Jim, a lot of our listeners may be listening to this and not knowing exactly what a district attorney does. So could you explain to them kind of what is a DA?
That's a fair question. I was picking a jury one time, and that was one of the questions that the jurors had for me when I started asking them questions. So what the prosecutor does is we are the ministers of justice. And so our job is to evaluate the strength of a case that the police department might make an arrest, or the sheriff's department makes an arrest. And they bring that case to my office. And we have about 30 lawyers that work there. And it's our job to determine whether or not probable cause exists to push the case forward to get in front of a judge. Oftentimes, if we don't feel that the probable cause has been met by law enforcement, we have an ethical duty to be sure that case is not brought forward into the court system. So we are sort of the screeners initially with law enforcement, which is one of the reasons why, especially on the murder cases, I think it's important with somebody with 25 years of experience with these murder cases being the person who's screening them to be sure that law enforcement, number one, arrests the right person, and number two, to be sure that there is enough evidence that would substantiate and support a conviction if we got to court.
So, I think it's important also for our listeners to understand that just because your office decides to bring charges, that is at a probable cause standard. That's a lower standard. It's still on your office at that point to prove its case and to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So from that standpoint of, okay, you've decided to bring a charge, what does your office do from that point on going forward to a trial?
Well, quite honestly, when we are screening these cases, although the law enforcement, we hold them to what we've described as a burden of proof that is probable cause. When you actually are screening the case, especially on the murder cases, we don't want to get to just probable cause. We want to be sure that law enforcement has done their work beforehand, so that if we had to go into court the next day, we would feel comfortable taking that case in front of a jury or in front of a judge and proving it beyond a reasonable doubt, which becomes our new standard of proof. So even though the bar may be at probable cause, when we screen the cases from law enforcement, especially the murder cases, we want to be sure that it actually meets a higher burden, so that if we had to go the next day, we'd be ready to go.
So it's really about going that extra mile to really weed through and figure out which cases you've got the actual proof for, what you feel like you have the proof for, and which ones you don't.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's so fascinating to know what goes on at your office, to be able to kind of go through that process. But that's at the courthouse, that's inside a courtroom, that's on the phone with law enforcement. That's not the only way in which your office touches our community here in Forsyth County. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things that I see that we do in Forsyth County specifically that other counties don't, or don't have programs set up for. I always felt like our county tries to be very forward and progressive when it comes to alternative programs, when it comes to rehabilitative programs. Ones I can think of off the top of my head are drug treatment court, mental health treatment court, veterans treatment court, all these alternative courts.
Sure.
do you care to comment about that and how that plays into your office?
Oh yeah. So we also believe in that most people can be rehabilitated from their crimes, and sometimes people stub their toe out there, and they deserve a second chance. And the courts that you've mentioned, veterans treatment, we love veterans treatment, and Harold, of course, was instrumental in getting that off the ground. We think that's a wonderful way to help our vets that might be struggling or suffering out there. But we've also tried to stay on the cutting edge of so many different programs to help the community. The prosecutor's office, I don't believe we just should be prosecuting people, but we should be helping people before they actually end up having to get prosecuted. And one of those ways we do that is we started a program. It was the first of its kind back in 2015, 2016, and we called it community outreach. And what we did was we partnered with at that time was known as the Black Ministers Conference of Winston-Salem. And we brought them in one day and we said, listen, let's figure out who in this community needs help in getting their driver's license back.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have a driver's license, you can get a better job, you can further your education, you can go visit family and friends. It's critical in a place like Winston-Salem. And again, this is before Uber or Lyft or any of those other things.
Mm-hmm.
So we offered an opportunity for folks to come in and have their licenses cleaned up so that they could get their driver's license back. And I'm proud to tell you we helped thousands of people along the way.
I remember the response on that. It was huge.
It was tremendous.
It practically inundated your office. I remember the paperwork that was coming in. It was a lot.
It was a lot, but we helped so many people,
Mm-hmm.
and people would come back to us and they'd want to knock on the front window and just held up a copy of their driver's license, and tears are coming down the side of their face. And I thought that was a tremendous thing to give back to the community. Well, that program took off so well that it has been duplicated not just across the state, but in other parts of the Southeast that have read about it. So we take a lot of pride in that. And one of the things, while we've all been suffering through this pandemic for the last year or so, prior to the pandemic, we were all struggling with an epidemic here that dealt with heroin and opioid abuse and addiction.
Right.
And the clerk at the time of Forsyth County was a lady by the name of Susan Fry. She's now retired, but she and I got together and we tried to brainstorm and come up with a plan on how we could help people that were so addicted to the ravages of heroin and opioids. And of course, as you both know, that leads to what we call crimes of opportunity.
Yes.
If you've had your cars broken into like I have, if you've had things stolen off your front porch like I have, they're annoying, aggravating crimes, but they're not violent crimes. But so many of the things that we get stolen out of our cars and our front porch are as a result of people trying to feed their addiction. They take that stuff, they sell it, they have money, they can go buy the drugs they need. So we looked at the heroin and opioid addiction and how many folks were over in our jail that were addicts, how many times EMS and the fire department was responding to overdose deaths. And I was watching a program one time and I came up with this pharmaceutical company called Alkermes. Alkermes produces a drug called Vivitrol. And what Vivitrol acts as is a blocker. So if you're addicted to heroin or opioids and you receive an injection of Vivitrol, it actually prevents you from getting high on heroin or opioids. And so even if you take what your normal dose is, you can't get high. And along with some therapeutic brain treatment that we focus on as well, we're able to go over to the jail and get these folks signed up in our program. It lasts for about 18 months. We work on the brain as well. We get them hooked up with a probation officer, better housing, a job, all of these things that help them get back on the right track. And the success that we have seen in this program is unbelievable. We have people that are going back to medical school. We have folks that are getting incredible jobs, and it's as a result of just getting their life put on a different track from what they've been on, and the addiction that has just ruined their families and their personal lives, and now they're on a track to success. So again, this is something that is now being copied in other parts of the state. as people see the success that we've had here in Forsyth County. So you're right, Dylan. We want to stay on the cutting edge at all times. So I'm constantly trying to come up with creative ways for us to be at the forefront of how we deal with our community problems.
Right. I mean, because, especially as it relates to Vivitrol and the data program, you think of all the lives that have been saved. Mm-hmm. You think of all the families that have been kept intact, due to all that. I mean, the ripple effect of being able to shift people's lives in that way is huge. It's a philosophy that we take here at our law firm, to try to figure out what's going on with somebody. Mm-hmm. What's the underlying issue, and trying to address that. Mm-hmm. And, addiction, we hate to say it, is a more common one than we would like to see.
Oh, sure.
And, those rehabilitative programs, if people go at them full tilt and they take them serious, it's amazing what they can do to change their lives. And the amazing thing about the data program specifically is you do have this pharmaceutical aspect to it that just makes it so you can't even receive the high in the first place. So why even do it?
Right. And I think the thing that's important to mention is, number one, our county commissioners have bought in and supported this program 100%, and they provide the funding that makes it all work.
Because those shots are over $1,000.
They're over $1,000 for each one. That's correct. Right. And they have in our partnership here with all the stakeholders, we've been assured that there's not one person that enters this program that will be left without a shot because they can't afford it. We're going to find the money to be sure people can get through the program and turn their lives around, because it reduces our jail population, it reduces the crimes of opportunity, and as you said, Dylan, it helps in terms of the family dynamic when people can raise their kids and they can, have the same relationships they used to have with cousins and mothers and brothers and everything else. So it is really important.
If you're just joining us here on WTOB, I'm Dylan Greenwood along with Harold Eustache on For the Record with Greenwood Law. And today we got with us District Attorney Jim O'Neill from Forsyth County. And we've been talking about all the ways in which the Forsyth County DA's office reaches out to the community, has its thumb on the pulse of what's going on in our community, and the ways in which your office, Jim, addresses issues that we have, because every community has them, and it's incumbent upon our leaders and our elected officials to address them as they come up and not just sit idle by. And I think your office does a great job of doing that. One way in which that we see it day in and day out on the ground in court are through diversionary programs. We've touched on Veterans Treatment Court, and we've touched on the data program as these alternative ways in which we look to rehabilitate or we look to address some sort of concern. But that's not the only way, is it, Jim?
No, it's not. And as you both know, you both do an excellent job representing people charged with crimes, and it's not unusual for you to come in after representing a client, and oftentimes it could be somebody that's charged with a silly misdemeanor, trespassing in a park after hours. Of course, we have to acknowledge the fact that kids under the age of 21 may drink alcohol, and when that happens, when you come to our office and you're able to show us this is a good kid who made a mistake, we have a program known as Deferred Prosecution. And generally speaking, so the folks out there listening can understand, you will bring us a proof that the person did some community service, wanted to be sure that they don't have some sort of a alcohol or drug problem, and once they have completed that community service and they don't get in any trouble, we generally take a dismissal of the charge, which of course is the benefit of your client, but it also allows them to give back a little bit to the community for the transgression that they committed. So and you also, that's just random misdemeanors, but as you also know, you may be representing somebody who is charged with a felony amount of marijuana or a felony possession of cocaine or drugs similar to that. And when you come in and you can show us that this was a bad mistake that your client made, and maybe he or she was hanging out with the wrong crowd, and here's a copy of their transcript, and what we allow them to do is, again, enter what we call, under the general statutes, known as a 90-96. And if people, again, complete some community service, they go and get a screening to be sure that they're going to be okay moving forward and they don't need further court intervention, and that once they successfully complete those things, the prosecutor's office will take a dismissal. So we do believe, we're all human and people do make mistakes, but as long as it's not a mistake of a crime of violence, we try very hard to work with people that you represent to be sure that they get a second chance to live a life and lead a life that can be exemplary, despite the fact that they may have stubbed their toe somewhere along the way. So we do offer many opportunities. We don't want to felonize people. We don't want to do that. Of course, if you commit a crime of violence, a robbery, a murder, you hurt a child, it's a different situation entirely. We also put a lot of emphasis on domestic violence. We want to be sure that domestic violence is not going on in people's homes and in relationships with other folks. So we do take a pretty serious stand on those types of crimes.
Right, and that's been a big concern, obviously, throughout COVID, with people being kind of forced to be at home a lot more. And your office and court system here in Forsyth County has a dedicated domestic violence courtroom with a dedicated team of domestic violence prosecutors and legal assistants within your office.
And we want to be sure that people are safe. Generally speaking, it is women that are the victims of the abuse. Of course, it has happened. It's been on the other foot as well. The shoe's been on the other foot, but mainly that's what we see day in and day out. And we want to be sure that when a woman goes back to her house or back to a relationship, that she's in a safe place and she's not in danger of being harmed or worse. So that is something we do take extremely seriously.
We know that with all the serious stuff that you do on a day-to-day basis, you also, get time to be out in the community yourself. And so can you tell us about some of the things that you do out in the community, some of the things you're known for?
Yeah, so my kids are still young, but I enjoy getting out there and coaching, whether it's youth basketball or youth flag football and those sorts of things. And my girls are big in lacrosse. So
I heard you're basically the Coach K of youth basketball.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go that far, but I've been coaching high school lacrosse since before I even had a family, and it's something that's been going on 20 years. I started at Bishop McGuinness, started the lacrosse program out there, and then moved a little closer to home to coach over at Reynolds High School. And I've been at Reynolds for 12 or 13 years now. And I do think it's important if you are an elected official to be giving back to the community because it allows you to interact with folks in a way that they don't see you normally. And it humanizes you a little bit. But in the same breath, when I have these young, 16, 17, 18-year-old boys, all of the things that I thought were problems during the day, when you get out there on the field with them and they want to talk to you about, something that's on their mind, it puts everything in perspective about what we should be thinking about and what we should be concerned about. So those are important times in a young man's life, 16, 17, 18 years old. And I want to be a good role model for them. I want them to be able to come and talk to me about their issues and their problems. And to this day, I continue to maintain relationships with kids that have long since graduated Reynolds High School, and some of them are married. And I'm happy to help them to this day, and I still help them to this day, should they find themselves in trouble. Because
when I was a prosecutor in your office, it was very common to see, 5, 6, 7 of these young people with you in the afternoons and stuff like that. And I know you made a very positive impact on their life. So
yeah, it's sometimes it's not just the coaching.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to be sure everybody gets a meal before they get home at night, and sometimes you got to be sure that everybody's got a ride home as well. So it goes beyond just what you see on the field day in and day out. The responsibility, I think, extends well past and beyond that.
Well, Jim, we can't express enough gratitude for you coming on For the Record with Greenwood Law this morning. And, this has been such a great opportunity to have you here talking about all the ways in which your office touches our community, helps to address issues that are going on within our community. And I think you guys are doing a great job because you've really plugged yourselves in and made it so that has to happen within your office. It's not just something it's an option. It seems like it's more of a compulsion, really,
right.
Which really that's how it should be with our local officials and our elected officials. So again, thank you so much for coming on today, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate the listeners tuning you in and listening to what our message is today, and I hope folks learn some stuff about the DA's office they might not have known before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, WTOB listeners, on For the Record with Greenwood Law. We hope you got something out of this show. Before we go, we want to give you our Greenwood Law Bill of Rights. First, I will not represent myself in a court of law. Second, I will not do law enforcement's job for them. Third, I will not make statements when stopped by law enforcement. 4, I will not consent to searches when stopped by law enforcement. And 5, I will not be my own star witness for the prosecution. It is not a crime to know your rights. Folks, stay safe out there. Thank you again for listening. This is For the Record with Greenwood Law, signing off.